How's it going, you guys? It's Scott with Everyday Home Repairs. Now, I need a concrete slab for a future 12-foot by 16-foot modern shed that we'll be building on the channel. I wanted to do that as a one-man operation so I could document each and every step in the process, and I even baked that down into a complete DIY build guide so this can help you through each one of those steps, estimate your cost correctly, and help you avoid those costly mistakes. So overall, it was a fun project, a heck of a lot of work. So let's jump into the step one, and that is your site preparation. I'm just roughing in the dimensions a little bit larger than the 12 by 16 pad so I can cut it down. I actually need to remove some material because I want this surface to be compacted and 4 inches underneath the top cap surface. So when I add my 4 inches of compacted gravel base, then it's right at the same level of that top cap. Now I have some hard pack, so I'm going to use a tiller to kind of work that up as well to help me get that material out. And I'll roll all this up into the DIY build guide. How many hours did I use the tractor? How much did the tiller cost? How many yards of gravel did I use? How many bags of Quikrete? For your reference, so you can see what I did here and then use that for your own project to hopefully make your plan of attack. Now you're gonna need a way to check your elevation. I'd love to use this Klein Tools laser level, but in the daytime you're just not gonna see it. So I'm gonna use a water level. If you have a smaller pad, maybe you can just use a board with a 4-foot level on it and go that path. But I need something that I can really move around the whole job site, checking my dirt level, but also checking my compacted gravel. So I'm using a 2-gallon bucket here and then just a little fitting out of the irrigation section from my local Home Depot. And I'll thread that in place with a little super glue and use some vinyl tubing. 1/2 of an inch inside diameter is what I'm using. So a few band clamps on there and I'll just clamp it on the little 90-degree fitting. And then once I have that in place, I'll run about 1.5 to 2 foot of this tube up this stake. And you'll see how this stake comes in handy. I'm just zip tying it in place and making sure it's secure and it doesn't move around. So we'll clip those off flush and then start to fill the bucket. So I have the stake in the ground and it has a lower elevation than the bucket. Why am I doing this? I'm pushing the air through the tube, so I'm gonna flow out. The head pressure from the bucket pushes that water right out the tube because it is lower than the bucket level itself. Once you have the air out, then you can take your bucket and your open end of the tube on your stake at the same level and walk down to your pad and then set it on your reference. What I'm going to use is that top cap as my reference point for my elevation of the dirt and also elevation of the gravel. Okay, so how does the water level work? Because it's super handy. I wanted 2 references. One, I wanted a reference to this red dirt surface, my compacted dirt. So I set my stake on a point that is 4 inches underneath this top cap. That is my reference. And then I waited for the water to balance out in the tube because I know once it balances out, it is going to equal the height of our little bucket reservoir. And I had marked on my reservoir, where is the water level when we started? When I marked this stick, where was that water level? Why do you do that? Well, you might get air in your line, so you need to go dump out a bunch of water to flush out that air, and you need to be able to fill this back up at this exact reference point, because if you don't, as this elevation changes, that's going to then throw off your markings here on your stick. So then I just mark that reference point here as the water settled in, and now I can move this stick all around my job site, and I know that that water level is going to stay at that reference point. Now, if I go up, we see the water level drops in the tube. If I go, let's say, down, it will actually go up in the tube, right? So that is how the water level works. And my markings here are 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch on the low side or the high side. So I know if I need to fill in dirt. And then I did the same thing for gravel, but instead of marking the stake when the stake was down on the dirt, the stake was actually on the top cap. That's my reference for my compacted gravel base. I want it to be at the same elevation and level with the top cap. So I let the water level establish the equilibrium here, and I know that's going to be at the same height here as the reservoir, and that's where I made my mark. And then I just measured 1 inch and 2 inch on each side, so I'd have that reference as we go across measuring on this compacted gravel base. And why that stake's so nice is once you get done referencing, you can just stake it back in the ground, leave it there, start working again, and then just pull it out whenever you need it. So jumping back, now I like the elevation of the dirt, so I'm just gonna compact that down one last time and then measure out larger than my 12 by 16. So I'm going a little bit more like a 13 by 17 or even a little bit further. And this is just giving my boundaries for which I'm gonna drop in my crushed stone. Some people also call it road pack, depending on where you're at. It's just a mix of fines and the stones and will compact down compared to something like a clean 3/4 inch gravel like this. I'm gonna go with the road pack. And if you guys have a DIY concrete pour in your future, do not forget to download our free DIY complete build guide. There's a link in the description, or if you're watching on your TV, you can just scan this QR code. This is meant to be a plan in your hand. We have links to the different aggregates. What is the complete process you're gonna follow? Even things like side-by-side comparison of mixers so you can make the right decision. And then I provide the actual details of my pour here, along with how long did I take and how much did it cost. Now I'm just feathering this in, kind of taking my time, pulling it out of the 5-ton dump trailer and then spreading it with the Kubota. And then I'll take my measurements with the water level as I go, even before it's compacted, just to see where I'm gonna need a little bit more material or possibly where I need to pull material out. And then once it looks pretty good, I will start to compact as I go, even without covering my entire pad surface, and kind of go multiple iterations throughout. Now, if you do not have the dump trailer or the tractor, at least get a truck unloader like this. Now this one has the tailgate down. If you're getting it filled with road pack, you have the tailgate up, but you would have that sheet where it'd be underneath your aggregate, and then you can unload that into your work site. That is gonna save you a ton of effort and is really inexpensive. You'll see a link in the description. So we're getting a little bit closer here. I do water that down as I go. You do not wanna have that too dry or it's just not gonna compact as well. And it'll also start to just kick up a bunch of dust. Now I got a little bit more in the corner I need. Again, I want to be bigger than my 12 by 16 before setting in the forms, but here's what it looks like. I'm within a 1/2 inch of the top surface of my top cap, so I'm ready to start putting my forms in, which is a multi-step process I'll walk you through. Starting off, I'll get my 2x4s out, and I'm using two 16-foot 2x4s and two 12-foot 3-inch 2x4s because the 12-footers are going to overlap the 16s. That will give me an internal dimension of 12 foot by 16 foot, which is actually what I want for my pad. Sinking 2 screws in each of these corners, I will also sink a screw in the exact corner on the top for each of my corners. This helps for hooking your tape measure on and will also be used to pull string line from. So I highly recommend finding the corners and sinking some screws in there. Now we'll go ahead and position the pad, and I'm just spacing it correctly to my top cap and then pulling my diagonals. I'll make small adjustments to make sure I have perfect right triangles at each of these corners and it's a perfect rectangle. Once that's good, then I'll sink 2 stakes per corner and move on to step 2. Step 2 will pull string lines from those screws that we put in place, and this is going to give us a great reference to not have something like that, which is a super bowed side. So now I can make some adjustments and straighten out that 2x4 to make sure that our forms are straight and that we won't have to make any adjustments after getting everything set. Now that inside stake is just temporary. I'll take that out in my last step here, but it's just holding my forms before I put the screws to the stakes, which is this last step. In the last step, I'm going to use my bubble level, my 4-foot bubble level, and just level up all the forms. So I'll go ahead and start leveling up my corners and then actually drilling screws through those stakes that we position. So now we're actually adjusting the elevation. And this will give me a little bit of spacing underneath my form, which I'll have to come back in and fill in here in a minute. But this will get everything perfectly level, and then that will give you your reference for your screed board during the pour. Now the thing I'm doing different here, this will be 2 pours. So I need to use a quick key, which is a product I've never used before and super handy. So I'm just putting 2 10-foot sections together, cutting those so I can get an overall 12-foot length, and I put a few rivets to hold these together. And this is a really cool product because I'm able to put it down the middle and break my pour up into 2 separate pours, each of those being 8 foot by 12 foot, which is something I can handle by myself. So I just place my stakes and make sure it's all level to our outside boards. and that it's positioned and strong in place, because that's going to be a reference for you. The other additional benefit this does, after I put in a little bit more compacted base here, it gives me a way to put rebar through both of these pores, even though they're poured independently, because it passes through the keyway. And then I'll just start tying my rebar, and all I'm doing is just tying in an 18-inch by 18-inch grid, nothing too fancy. So I get rebar all the way through. If you want to use mesh, you can use mesh. Just make sure you're using chairs and elevate that off the bottom so you don't have to pull it up during the pour. So the way we tie these together, it's super easy, nothing too fancy. You don't have to be too tight with it. And I'll just use that little scrap piece of wood that I cut to 18 inches as my reference to have a consistent grid throughout the rebar. So I'll finish up tying, and then this is where I'll space it up to put it right in the middle of those forms. I want everything set, and I don't want to be messing with that during the pour. Now, unfortunately, I have a ton of rain headed my way. So what I need to do is basically set up my site, put all my Quikrete bags, these are 80-pound Quikrete bags, in place, and have my Harbor Freight mixer, which is the mixer I'm using for the first pour, and I'll actually use a mud mixer on the second pour. I need to dig ditches here to get the water away, because we have about 4 inches of rain heading in, and I do not want to mess up my entire site because I want to pour right after the rain. So I got to put tarps over this thing, and sure enough, it rained a ton. And kind of turned this thing into a swimming pool, which I had to drain out again so I could get right back on my project. So watch your weather during your pours, because it can really throw you off. So I just batch mix 80 pounds at a time. You can fit more into the Harbor Freight mixer, but that worked out well for me. I also recommend that you actually split your bags right down the middle. Use a piece of rebar to split it open so you have 40-pound pouches each, and it just makes it a lot easier to place that within the mixer so you're not struggling with the 80-pound bag. And this is gonna take you some time. Doing a one-man operation, if you can get help, get help. This would be a lot easier with 2 people, one mixing and then one kind of finishing off and screeding off your concrete. So this is just a single mix. I clean out the inside, and I actually fill it water up to the black gasket in the middle. That was my reference line. Then I dumped the 2 40-pound bags for 80 pounds a piece. And you might want to wear a mask. You do not want to be breathing in that dust. And then once it's fully mixed, I'd put it into the wheelbarrow and dump it. Now that mixer is a little ways away. That's because the way I had to prep everything for the rain. And you just want to always keep your mixer going. And then once you have it mixing, you can go over and start to screed. And this takes you so long, and you can download that build guide. It'll tell you exactly how long this took, what was the average per bag, how many bags did I pour for this side, and also give you the comparison for the next side with the mud mixer. But you're gonna be screeding, you're gonna be edging, you're gonna be floating, and you also, if you're doing a broom finish, are gonna be broom finishing before you're even completed with your pour. So just try to get your time management down so that you can handle that as a one-man operation if that's what you're doing. And I'm definitely not a professional, but here's a closer look at some of those different steps. So I had moved a bunch of concrete from the mixer into the forms, and now I'm using my come along to kind of place that concrete to do one round of screeding off the concrete, referencing the level of the metal keyway here closer to you and the far side form. So I used my board, and now I'm filling small holes in with my float and just sawing back and forth. This really helps if you have another person, because you both can be on the outside of the forms, but it is doable. This is 8 foot wide, so it is doable as one person. Now, it was pretty wet that day. My pour was wet, but it was also raining. So you can see there's already cream on the top of this, so I didn't have to really work that cream up through the concrete. And then I'll just pull that all the way through until I like the finish, tap down that stake a little bit so I can pull it through, and then that would be one round, and now I'll start mixing up more concrete and go back to it. Now after about an hour or so, depending on how wet your pour is and how things are setting up with your outside conditions, you'll go through and you can start doing your edging. I did edging on any of my wood forms and not on the quick key keyway in the middle, because that is going to bring 2 separate pours together and the keyway is going to stay in place. Then once things set up a little bit more, I went through and did my broom finish, and this is going to be the final look for the pad. Now, once this was done with my first pour, I moved on to a different type of mixing. So a few days later, now I'm doing the other side, and this is with the mud mixer. The mud mixer is a continuous flow and it augers through mixing the water. I really like this mixer, but it's kind of a comparison where you would buy the Harbor Freight mixer usually or borrow it from a friend, and this one you would rent. And here's how it works. So the dry mix is augered through the auger, and then you adjust the amount of water that goes in, and then it mixes as it comes out the end. Now you'll get the hang of it, and it'll be a little bit wet or a little bit dry, and you'll make small adjustments, and it takes a little bit of time for that to go through your auger. I really set it at about 60 to 65 water setting. And you can see I just turned that up because it was coming out here a little bit dry. So I'm trying to add a little bit more water to get the right mix. And then this hopper here, if you have the expansion, can fit up to 240 pounds of Quikrete, which you're gonna need because this thing chews through the Quikrete. For me, I had to stop the mud mixer about 3 different times so I could screed things off, float it off, do my edging, and work the concrete because the mud mixer is so much faster at putting that in place. Just know, if you stop the mud mixer, make sure that you run it every so often because you do not want the concrete drying in that auger. That could cause you all sorts of problems and make your cleanup a bear at the end. Now, this was much faster, but again, side-by-side comparison is in that build guide, so you can kind of use that information to make the right decision for your own job coming up. So we'll use our screed board, screeding off from our finish side to our form side, and then just go ahead and float things off, edge it, and broom finish. So my 2 pours are now complete, and it's really serving as one pad, especially because of that quick key keyway I have right in the middle that ties the 2 pads together. And then we had that rebar shooting all the way through. So this is gonna be one pad for my 12 by 16 modern shed build that's coming up. Now don't forget, concrete takes about 20 days to get full strength as a 20-day curing cycle. And to help your concrete along, it's good to wet it down. First few days, you do that multiple times a day, and then just do it about once a day for as long as you can, hopefully for multiple weeks. Then you can remove your stakes and your forms, usually within 24 hours. I had to leave mine in a little bit longer because I was out of town, so I wasn't able to remove those until about 1 week after the pour. I do think that could have been a mistake because that wood can pull water out of your concrete, which might weaken that edge. And I do see I don't have one nice consistent pour. Now that might be because the wood pulled some water out, but also it's good to tap your forms as you go along, which I did not do during my pour. So use your hammer, tap your forms, and then hopefully work that concrete right up against that form so you have a nice smooth finish. So here is a closer look at the finished product, and you can see my broom finish is a little inconsistent, but from a DIY perspective, this is usually what you can expect until you get a little bit more experience. Now, let me know your guys' feedback. Overall, I wouldn't have done too many things differently. I would have tapped my forms and also try to remove those after 24 hours so that the boards weren't pulling water out. But I also rolled all the lessons learned and the process followed up into our DIY build guide, which the link or the QR code is going to get you the free download. And then in the build guide, you'll see all of my costs, each one broken out. You'll see what I spent on rentals, what I spent on the Harbor Freight mixer, and then all the materials, which I had a lot of base gravel that I needed to purchase. All in, for a DIY pad, 12 by 16, I was $2,471 for a total project cost. Now that is pretty expensive, but comparing to 2 quotes I got in my area from professionals, one was $4,700 and one was $5,400. So right over $5,000 on average for a professional to do a 12 by 16 in my area. But let me know down in the comments, what are you guys paying for a 12 by 16 pad similar to this with a 4-inch pour? But in my book, saving $2,500 by taking this on myself, and I just like to learn these skills. I like taking on these projects and slowly building up my experience level inside and outside my own home. Now, if you have a project more in repairing your concrete sidewalk or driveway, you can check out this video right here, and I'll walk you through the complete process of how I remove that section of my driveway and then put rebar into the good section so I could pour new concrete and tie everything together. So thanks for joining me on this video, and we'll catch you on that next one. Take care.